Three of us went camping that weekend. Nothing extreme. Just a normal trip a few hours north where we could fish, drink a little, and get away from work for a couple of days. It was me, my friend Tyler, and our buddy Chris. We'd all known each other since high school. And honestly, the trip almost didn't happen because Tyler kept trying to back out at the last minute. He swore he had a weird feeling about going. We made fun of him for it the entire drive up. The campground itself was pretty isolated. Not an official park or anything. Just a clearing near an old logging road people used occasionally. No cell service, no lights, nothing nearby except woods. We got there around sunset and set up camp normally. By dark we had a fire going and were already drinking. And for the first few hours everything was completely normal. Honestly, one of the better camping nights I've had in years. Then around midnight, Chris asked a weird question. He looked past the fire towards the woods and said, "Did you guys see another campsite when we came in?" Me and Tyler both said no. Chris frowned and pointed deeper into the trees behind us. "There's definitely another fire over there." At first I thought he was messing around, but when I turned around, I saw it too. A very faint orange flickering through the woods. Farther back than our campsite. Not close, but definitely there. The weird thing was we never saw another car come down the road. And trust me, we would have heard it. The road was narrow and covered with gravel. Every vehicle sounded loud out there. Tyler immediately looked uncomfortable. He kept staring towards the trees while quietly drinking. Eventually, Chris laughed it off and said we should go say hi. I remember not wanting to for some reason. Not scared exactly, just uneasy. But after another hour and a few more drinks, we ended up walking towards the light anyway. The farther we got from our campsite, the quieter everything became. There was no wind, no insects, nothing. Just our flashlights and footsteps. And eventually we found a clearing. There was another campsite, a pretty large one actually. Old fire pit, camping chairs, coolers, and a tent. But nobody was there, not a single person. The fire was still burning though. Not huge, but active. Like somebody had been sitting there recently. I remember Chris joking, maybe they're messing with us. But nobody laughed, because the place felt wrong immediately. The chairs were arranged around the fire like people had just gotten up at the same time. One of the coolers was still open, and there was food sitting out. Like whoever was camping there disappeared in the middle of the night. Tyler kept saying we should leave. Then Chris noticed something near the tent. Footprints. A lot of footprints. All leading away from the campsite into the woods. Not back towards the road. Not towards us. Straight into the trees. I remember shining my flashlight between the trunks trying to see farther. And that's when we heard it. Very faint at first. Like someone talking in the distance. Except it didn't sound like a normal conversation. It sounded like multiple voices whispering at once. Tyler immediately said, "Nope, we're leaving." And honestly, none of us argued. We started walking back towards our campsite pretty quickly after that. Not running, but definitely moving fast. And the entire walk back, it felt like somebody was behind us. Not close enough to hear footsteps, just there. You know that feeling when your brain keeps telling you not to look behind you? That. When we finally reached our own campsite again, the fire was almost out, which didn't make sense because we'd only been gone maybe 20 minutes. Chris immediately started throwing more wood on. Nobody even joked anymore after that. The mood had completely changed. Then Tyler suddenly froze, staring towards the woods again, and quietly said, "The other fire is gone." We all turned immediately. The orange flickering light deeper in the woods had disappeared completely. Pitch black now. And for some reason, that scared me more than seeing it in the first place. None of us slept much that night. At one point, around maybe 3 a.m., I woke up hearing footsteps outside the tent. Slowly walking around the campsite. I remember holding my breath, listening. The footsteps circled the tent once, then stopped completely. Nobody said anything. None of us moved. And after maybe 30 seconds, the footsteps walked back towards the woods again. The next morning, Chris admitted he heard them too. So did Tyler. We packed our stuff faster than I've ever packed in my life, and we were leaving. Tyler noticed something hanging from a tree near the edge of our campsite, One of Chris's flannel shirts, the same one he swore he lost during the night, about 7 feet off the ground. I moved into that apartment because it was cheap. That was honestly the only reason. It sat on the 3rd floor of an older building near the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Long, narrow hallways, dim lighting, old carpet that smelled vaguely like dust no matter what season it was. The place always felt strangely quiet, too. Not peaceful quiet, more like muted. Like the building absorbed sound. I mostly kept to myself there. Worked long hours, came home late, watched TV for an hour or two, went to bed. And for the first couple months, everything was normal. Then one night around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. At first I ignored it. People came and went at all hours. But after a minute I realized something strange. The footsteps weren't passing by. They kept stopping directly outside my door. Then continuing, then stopping again. Back and forth, slow pacing. I muted the TV and listened carefully. The hallway outside my apartment was carpeted, so the sound was soft, but definitely there. Someone walking slowly outside my door. I remembered staring toward the entrance. The hallway outside my apartment was carpeted, so the sound was soft, but definitely there. Somebody walking slowly outside my door. I remember staring towards the entrance, waiting to hear another apartment open. Nothing. No voices, no keys, just pacing. After maybe 5 minutes, it stopped completely. I eventually convinced myself it's probably somebody drunk or on the phone. But the next night it happened again. Same time around 2 a.m. Slow footsteps, back and forth outside my apartment. This time I actually looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I remember standing there confused for several seconds, and then while still looking through the peephole, I heard the footsteps again, directly outside the door. I jumped back immediately. The sound had been so close it felt impossible. I checked the peephole again instantly. Still nothing. That's when the whole thing started getting under my skin. Over the next week, the footsteps became routine, always late at night, always outside my apartment, and always impossible to see through the peephole. Eventually, I stopped sleeping well. I'd find myself laying awake waiting for it to start. And every night, around 2 a.m., there it was, slow pacing, back and forth, back and forth. One night, I finally got angry enough to open the door. The second I did, the hallway went silent, completely silent, and nobody was there. The hallway lights buzzed softly overhead, and that was it. I stepped out looking both directions. Empty. I even walked down towards the stairwell. Nothing. But when I turned back towards my apartment, I noticed something I swear hadn't been there before. A dark, wet footprint on the carpet outside my door. Just one. I stared at it for several seconds, trying to understand where it came from. The carpet around it was dry. Only that single footprint. And honestly, something about seeing physical evidence made everything feel worse, because now it wasn't just sound anymore. I stopped opening the door after that. Instead, I started turning the TV louder at night, trying to drown it out. But eventually curiosity got the better of me again. One night I decided to record the hallway. I set my phone against the peephole around 1:45 a.m. and let it record. At 2:03, the footsteps started again. Back and forth, slow pacing. I sat frozen on the couch staring at the door while my phone recorded everything. The pacing continued for almost 10 minutes, then stopped suddenly. I waited another few minutes before checking. The hallway looked completely empty the entire time, but the audio, the footsteps were crystal clear, slow, heavy, right outside the door. And near the end of the recording, there was another sound too. Very faint, almost like whispering. I listened to it over and over, trying to make out words. Eventually I stopped, because the more I listened, the more it sounded like someone quietly repeating my apartment number. I bought the security camera after my neighbor's garage got broken into. Nothing major was stolen, but it made everybody on the street paranoid for a while. So I ordered one of those cheap motion-activated doorbell cameras online. Honestly, I barely even checked it most of the time. The neighborhood was quiet. Nothing ever happened. At first, the notifications were normal. Delivery drivers, cats, neighbors walking dogs. Then one morning, I woke up to 7 motion alerts between 2 and 3 a.m. I figured it was probably rain or bugs triggering the camera. But when I opened the app, my stomach immediately tightened. Every single clip showed the same thing. A person standing on my porch. Not knocking, not moving, just standing there facing the front door. The clips were each around 30 seconds long, and in every one, the person stayed completely motionless. Dark hoodie, hands at sides, face impossible to see clearly. I remember watching the clips multiple times trying to understand what I was looking at. The weirdest part were the timestamps. At 2:11, 2:18, 2:26, 2:33. Almost like whoever it was kept walking away then coming back. I checked outside immediately. There was nothing there. At first I considered calling the police, but technically the person hadn't done anything. They just stood there, still. I barely slept the next few nights. Every sound outside made me check the camera app again. Then 3 nights later, it happened again. Multiple alerts between 2 and 3 a.m. Same figure, same posture, standing silently on my porch. Only this time, in the final clip, the person was closer to the camera. Close enough I could see something strange. They weren't looking at the front door. They were looking directly into the camera lens. Almost like they knew I'd be watching later. I started turning lights on around the house before bed after that, leaving TVs running, trying to make it obvious somebody was awake. But the alerts kept coming. Every few nights, always late, always silent, and eventually I made a mistake. One night after getting another notification, I opened the live camera feed immediately. The porch was empty. I remember feeling relieved for maybe half a second. Then movement appeared at the edge of the screen. Someone standing beside the front window, outside the camera's normal view, watching the inside of my house. The guy across the street from me kept his porch light on constantly. At first, I didn't think anything about it. Lots of people leave lights on overnight. But after a while, I started noticing strange things about him. I never actually saw him leave for work. Never saw visitors. Never saw deliveries. Nothing. His house was always quiet. And every night, around the same time, his porch light would switch on. Exactly 9 p.m. Every single night. It became one of the weird neighborhood things you notice without realizing it. I work early mornings, so I'm usually awake late trying to force myself to get tired. Most nights I sit near the front window watching TV quietly, and eventually I started noticing him near the window of his house sometimes, not moving, just standing in silhouette. At first I assumed he was older, maybe lonely, maybe just somebody who couldn't sleep either. But over time, the whole thing started feeling wrong, because I realized something strange. I never saw lights on anywhere in the house, only the porch light, and occasionally that dark silhouette standing near the front window. One Friday night I came home late from mowing lawns. It was probably around midnight, and I pulled in my driveway. I noticed the porch light across the street flickering slightly, not blinking, more like struggling. I remember staring through my windshield for a few seconds before grabbing my stuff and heading inside. And right as I reached my front door, the light went completely out. For the first time since I've lived there. The entire house went black. I don't know why, but it immediately made me uncomfortable. The street suddenly felt darker than usual. I found myself looking toward the house multiple times while locking my door. I didn't see anyone. That night I kept checking through the blinds. Nothing. No porch light, no silhouette, no movement. And honestly, I expected everything to go back to normal the next night. But it didn't. The house stayed dark. Days passed, then a week. No lights, no movement, no car, nothing. Eventually I figured maybe he moved, but something still bothered me, because there hadn't been moving trucks, people, or any activity. Nothing. It was like the house had simply gone empty overnight. One evening, I noticed a package sitting on his porch, then another the next day. Then newspapers started piling up. That's when the uneasy feeling really started. The neighborhood started talking about it too. People mentioning they hadn't seen him in a while. One older woman even knocked on the door apparently. No answer. But nobody called the police because technically nobody knew the guy. Weeks passed. Then one night the porch light came back on. Exactly at 9 p.m. I remember freezing when I noticed it through the window because it happened so suddenly. 1 second darkness, next second light. The exact warm yellow glow as before. And for some reason, that scared me more than anything. I kept staring at the house waiting to see movement. Eventually, I did. A silhouette appeared near the front window again, standing perfectly still, watching the street. I couldn't sleep that night. Something about it felt deeply wrong. The next morning before work, I noticed all the packages were still sitting untouched on the porch. That's what bothered me most. If someone was home, why hadn't they brought them inside? That night I found myself watching the house again. The silhouette moved away from the window. Then slowly, the front door opened. I remember sitting forward immediately. It was the first time I'd seen the door open, but nobody came outside. The doorway just stayed open, dark inside, completely black. After maybe 30 seconds, the porch light shut off again, and the door slowly closed. I didn't sleep at all that night, and the next morning, all the packages were gone. I leave for work really early. Most mornings I'm out the door around 4:30 a.m. while the neighborhood is still completely dark. And for years my mornings were exactly the same. Wake up, coffee, get dressed, leave. Until I started noticing the car. At first it didn't seem strange. It was parked across the street facing my house. Engine running, headlights off. I figured maybe it belonged to a neighbor or somebody waiting before work. But after a few days, I realized something uncomfortable. The car was always there before I came outside, and every morning, as soon as I backed up my driveway, it pulled away too. Never fast, never suspiciously. It just left, like it had been waiting. I tried ignoring it at first, but eventually I started checking for it every morning through the blinds before leaving. And almost every day, there it was. Same dark sedan, same spot, engine idling quietly. One morning, curiosity finally got the better of me. Instead of leaving immediately, I stayed inside watching from the window. 10 minutes passed. The car never moved. 15 minutes, still there. That's when I started feeling genuinely nervous, because now it seemed obvious the driver wasn't waiting for traffic or a neighbor. They were waiting for me. The next morning, I tried something different. I turned the porch light on suddenly before leaving. The second the light came on, the car slowly pulled away. I remember my stomach dropping instantly, because that reaction felt intentional, like whoever was inside didn't want to be seen. Over the next week, the situation got worse. Sometimes the car parked farther down the street, sometimes closer, but it was always there, always before dawn, and always gone after I left. I started changing my routine, leaving earlier, leaving later, sometimes not leaving at all right away. And every time, the car adjusted too. One morning around 4 a.m., I looked outside and realized the car wasn't across the street anymore. It was parked directly in front of my house, close enough that I could barely make out someone sitting behind the wheel. Watching the front door, I remember standing there frozen behind the blinds trying to decide what to do. Then suddenly, the interior dome light inside the car switched on, only for a second, but long enough for me to see there was nobody in the driver's seat. The car was empty, and the engine was still running.